all the studies that you point this out in your piece that have taken a look at masks outside of this massive one, they just sort of tick them off as one of many things that were part of the preventative measures in the school and then say, these are the effective mitigation measures. But that's like me saying, okay, in order to prevent the measles, I wore a coat, I wore mittens, I used hand sanitizer. Oh, and I got vaccinated for measles. Like, and then we just require all children everywhere to wear the coats and use the hand sanitizer. You know, it's like that's not how science is supposed to be conducted in figuring out what is an effective mitigation measure.
Right. So I talk about this in the article, and you raise a very important point, which is the CDC has continued to recommend what they call a layered approach, where you're doing a whole variety of things with ventilation, with masking, with this, that, and the other thing, and HEPA filters, and the list goes on.
Plexiglass, social distancing,
all of it, yeah, and hand hygiene, and to what degree each of these individual interventions are beneficial. You can't tell if you're doing them all at the same time. There's no way to differentiate and know. So if you're throwing the kitchen sink at a problem, that's fine, and that makes sense initially. With sort of precautionary principle. If this is March 2020, of course, we appreciate no one knows what's going on. We're, wiping our groceries down with like bleach or whatever. But
I never did that.
Yeah,
Never.
That's wise. But you can't continue doing a long list of things without looking at them individually and then claiming that they all work as you said, if you're wearing mittens and pants and all these other things. So, but that's exactly what the CDC has been doing, that they say, we know masks work because there's a low incidence of cases in schools while they do masks and ventilation, et cetera. And a number of the experts who I've spoke with for the article and who I talk with on a regular basis, and these are infectious disease specialists, epidemiologists, and aerosol scientists, have said it's entirely possible that almost the full benefit of the low transmission in schools is related to ventilation. That's entirely possible, and that masks maybe provide a marginal or no benefit at all. We don't know. So to continue to insist that it's masks when you're doing a whole variety of things is unscientific. Now, people continue to say, well, but we know masks work. We know they work. And I'm not an anti-mask person necessarily. There is good evidence, I think, that some masks do work in some circumstances. So it's not that there's zero benefit of masks, but there's a difference between a kid wearing a mask in school that they bought off of Etsy or Amazon or something for 7 hours in a classroom versus an adult wearing a well-fitted N95 in a healthcare setting or popping into Costco for 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. These are very different environments. So there needs to be a lot more nuance, I think, in how the guidance is distributed and how we look at the science.
Especially when you look at the CDC's guidance that 2-year-olds need to be masked all day. 2-year-olds. Sure, anybody with a child understands how easy that is, how compliant they are, how they're definitely going to keep it over their mouth and their nose all day long. And it's like, I think the CDC has said, okay, you can take it off during their school nap time. Oh, thanks for that. So they don't suffocate. We appreciate that, CDC. A 2-year-old who's got virtually no risk from COVID, but does from your mask. By the way, I had no idea that there was something called an aerosol scientist job. That's something to consider if things fall through here.
Right.
I do want to talk about Delta, though, right? Because this is what we're hearing now is, okay, David, but this article was dated August 20th, and the CDC study was, 6 weeks prior to that. And dun, 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 Delta has changed everything. What say you?
So what's interesting, I'm writing a book on the topic of kids in schools. And one of the challenges I've been confronted with as I work on the book is that, the story keeps evolving and there's new things. There's the new, and after Delta, there'll be Lambda and Epsilon. We're going to run through the Greek alphabet. But one of the things that has kind of crystallized for me is that the same themes repeat themselves. And one of them is that I'm not minimizing Delta. It is more contagious, but the evidence is very mixed at best as far as Delta being more virulent. And the same fundamental things apply regarding masking or other things, if you're still specifically referring to kids wearing masks in school. One of the scientists who I spoke with gave me a good analogy. He said, look, imagine you're wearing kind of a junky old raincoat. Maybe it's ripped in places, it's very thin, and you wear it it's drizzling outside, and you're going to get wet. Some of the water is going to leak through. Now, if that's the benefit of that kind of junky old raincoat when it's drizzling, what do you think is going to happen with that raincoat if you wear it in an absolute downpour? So that was the sort of like metaphor he gave for if masks are at best perhaps marginally beneficial in schools before Delta, what makes you think they're going to be beneficial after Delta, which is even more contagious and more transmissible?